Welcome to our series on the Westminster Confession of Faith. We are glad that you are here. In this module, we continue our study of Chapter 9 of Free Will. Today we turn to Section 2, which examines what the human will looked like before the fall, in the state of innocency. This is one of the most important sections in the entire chapter because it establishes the baseline. Before we can understand what sin did to the will, we first need to understand what the will was created to be. In the previous section, we established a foundational truth. God has given the human will a natural liberty. The will is not forced, and it is not determined by some absolute necessity of nature to choose good or evil. That principle applies to every human being in every state of existence. But now the confession moves from the general principle to the specific. Section 2 asks a pointed question. In the beginning, before the fall, what was the human will actually capable of? What could Adam do with the freedom God gave him? That is the question before us today. Let us now read the text of Westminster Confession, Chapter 9, Section 2. Man, in his state of innocency, had freedom and power to will and to do that which was good and well-pleasing to God, but yet mutably, so that he might fall from it. The confession begins with a claim about Adam's original condition. Man, in his state of innocency, had real positive moral goodness. This was not a state of moral neutrality or blank indifference. When God created Adam, he created him in his own image. Chapter 4, Section 2 says man was endued with knowledge, righteousness, and true holiness after his own image. The shorter catechism and larger catechism summarize the same truth. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 29 puts it plainly, "See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes." The word upright here carries moral weight. Adam was not merely innocent in the sense of being untested. He was positively oriented toward God and toward good. As Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 tells us, God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." And this image included genuine moral capacity. The confession then makes two related claims. Adam had both freedom and power. Freedom here means that Adam's will was not enslaved. There was no internal corruption pulling him away from God. And power means that Adam had genuine moral ability, the real capacity to do what was good and well-pleasing to God. This was not a merely theoretical possibility. Adam could actually choose the good, and he could carry out that choice. When Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, tells us that God saw everything he had made and declared it very good, that verdict included the moral condition of Adam himself. His will was part of what God pronounced good. The confession is insisting that Adam's uprightness was not a passive state. It was an active moral endowment, the ability to love God, to obey his commands, and to delight in doing his will. To understand what the confession is teaching, it helps to draw on a framework from Augustine that has deeply shaped Reformed theology. Augustine described 4 states of the human will across the whole arc of redemptive history. In the state of innocency, Adam was able to sin and able not to sin. The Latin phrases are posse peccare and posse non peccare. After the fall, humanity entered a second state, not able not to sin, or non posse non peccare. After regeneration by God's grace, believers are restored to the ability not to sin, though not yet perfectly. The confession itself in chapter 9, section 4, is careful to say that the regenerate person doth not perfectly, nor only will that which is good, but doth also will that which is evil, and in glory the redeemed will be unable to sin at all. Thomas Boston develops this framework at length in his work, Human Nature in its Fourfold State, published in 1720. The confession in section 2 is describing that first state, Adam's will before the fall. He had a genuine two-directional capacity. He could obey God, and he could disobey. Now we come to the most important word in the entire section, mutably. The word means changeably, or not yet confirmed in holiness. The confession says Adam had freedom and power to will the good, but yet mutably, so that he might fall from it. Adam's moral goodness was real, but it was not permanent. It was not yet confirmed or fixed. He stood in a state where he could maintain his uprightness, but he could also lose it. Boston, in Human Nature in its fourfold state, calls this the state of primitive integrity. Adam was genuinely good, but he was not yet beyond the possibility of change. The glorified saints in heaven will have an immutable goodness. They will never be able to fall. Adam did not yet have that kind of permanence. This single word, mutably, is the hinge of the entire section. It holds together two truths that might otherwise seem contradictory. Adam was truly good, and Adam was able to fall. The mutability of Adam's will is what made the test in the Garden of Eden meaningful. God placed Adam in the garden and gave him a command. As Genesis chapter 2, verse 17 records, God said, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." This command was a genuine moral test, and because Adam had both the freedom and the power to obey, the test was a true expression of his moral agency. Adam had all the natural and moral ability necessary for obedience to God's command. When the fall came, it was a real exercise of Adam's will. Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 tells us, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate." The fall was not caused by any defect in God's workmanship. The closing phrase of the section, "so that he might fall from it," points forward to what actually happened in Genesis chapter 3. Adam did fall, but the confession is careful here. It preserves both God's sovereignty and Adam's genuine moral agency. On the one hand, the confession teaches in chapter 3, section 1, that God from all eternity did ordain whatsoever comes to pass. The fall was not outside God's eternal decree. On the other hand, the confession is equally insistent that God is not the author of sin. Chapter 5, section 4 takes great care to affirm that God's providence extends even to sinful actions. Yet the sinfulness thereof proceedeth only from the creature, and not from God. Adam fell by his own will. Calvin, in the Institutes, insists on this point. The blame for the fall belongs entirely to Adam. At the same time, the confession does not attempt to explain exactly how a creature made upright chose to disobey. That remains one of the deepest mysteries in all of theology. The confession states the fact plainly and lets the tension stand. Adam was good, Adam was free, and Adam fell. You might wonder why any of this matters today. After all, none of us live in the state of innocency. But this section lays critical groundwork for everything that follows. First, it tells us that sin is an intruder. It is not an original feature of human nature. God made us upright. The brokenness we experience is not how things were meant to be. Second, it tells us that God's creation was genuinely good. The problem is not with creation itself, but with the fall. And third, it points us forward to hope. The restoration that Christ accomplishes is described in the same terms as Adam's original state. Colossians chapter 3, verse 10 uses this language, "and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator." And Ephesians chapter 4, verse 24 calls us to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. What Adam lost, Christ restores, and more. The final state of the redeemed will surpass even Adam's original condition, because in glory, our goodness will be immutable. Here are 3 questions for group discussion or personal reflection. First, what is the difference between Adam's freedom before the fall and the freedom believers have in Christ? Adam had genuine freedom and power to obey God, but his goodness was mutable. He could lose it. Believers in Christ are being renewed in knowledge, righteousness, and holiness, and in glory their goodness will be immutable. Christ restores and surpasses what Adam had. Second, why is it important that the confession says Adam's goodness was mutable? If Adam's goodness were immutable, there would be no explanation for the fall. The word mutably preserves both the reality of Adam's original goodness and the possibility of his choosing to disobey. It also highlights the superiority of the glorified state. where mutability will be removed entirely. Third, how does understanding Adam's original state shape the way we think about sin and redemption? Understanding that sin is an intruder, not an original feature of human nature, shapes how we view both the problem and the solution. The problem is not creation, but the fall. The solution is not escape from the material world, but restoration through Christ. Let us review what we have learned in this section. Westminster Confession, Chapter 9, Section 2, teaches that Adam, in the state of innocency, had genuine freedom and power to will and do what was good and pleasing to God. This moral ability was real but mutable, changeably, not yet confirmed in holiness. Adam fell by his own will. God is not the author of sin, and yet the fall was within God's sovereign decree. And what Adam lost, Christ restores, and the glorified state will surpass even the original. In the next section, Westminster Confession, Chapter 9, Section 3, we will examine what happened to the human will after the fall. How man wholly lost all ability to will any spiritual good accompanying salvation. Thank you for joining us today.